Hey Jacques here. This is a quick video where I'm showing you how to create a minimalistic but modern footer in Figma. Now, this video is part of a larger video in the description below, but we'll talk about that in a sec. This specific footer that I'm creating, again, it's super modern and it's meant for a yoga fitness studio. On top of that, this design that I'm using, you can actually go and download and use and duplicate it yourself. Link is in the description below. So let's jump into it. Okay, so now we're going to create the footer. We're going to create a beautiful footer for our entire design. By the way, if you only come across this video now and you want to see the full video, the entire video of us designing all this from scratch and using Bootstrap to do this all, make sure to check the full video. Make sure to check in the description below. And if you've been sticking around watching the full video, make sure to get your resources in the description below. By the way, just adding last thing before we get going here, we are going to develop all this. We are going to take this once we're done here, and I'm going to create a full video of creating and developing this using Bootstrap, using Docker, using Visual Studio Code, and creating something awesome. All right, so we're going to take the frame, we're going to drag it onto the artboard. We're going to make sure, as per always, that our width is 1920. We're going to add auto layout, and I think you're going to get used to this now. We've been doing it for quite a few times now. You get to the point now, you can see how easy it is once you've done it a few times, and it gets to be muscle memory. All right, so that's footer, what we've done right there. In this design, I am going to go for a very simplistic footer, something that is easy and simple. So we're going to go up, we're going to go to our logo, and before I duplicate this, before I do anything with this logo, I want to go back with our preview, and I just want to fine tune the logo because we're not 100% there yet. So first off, we're using black here. Don't like black. Let's go for gray 800 and let's see how that looks like. Definitely want to increase the font size on this. So let's change it to 24 perhaps. See how that looks like. Yeah, that already looks good. I'm going to take this icon and which is our logo by the way, and we're going to constrain the properties, which we can do right there. Let's increase the actual font size a little bit on it. And when I say font size, sorry, when I say font size, I'm so used to using font awesome with icons. That's why I said font size. But obviously, I mean the width and height of it. Okay, so last thing I want to do is take this logo and let's group it together. If it's not grouped together, yeah, it's already grouped together. And we're just going to add going to take the gap and make it 0 and add a bit of padding at the top, bottom, and left, right of it. Oh, okay. We don't want to change the gap because we do have two elements. For a second there, I thought we didn't have. All right, so with that done, I'm going to add a stroke. We're going to add primary, and we are going to add a little bit of a radius on this and see how that looks like. Give it a second. Sometimes it does take a second for our preview to load. There we go. Okay, that's obviously way too big. That's not what I was intended to happen here. So we're going to change this to 12 and let's modify this a little bit. Let's change our padding padding left and right and top and bottom. Let's change that and see how this looks like. All right, so first off, it looks like a button. I don't really like that. So let's get rid of the stroke. The stroke was a idea that I had and it's definitely not working. Okay, let's take this great fitness and let's change it to bold. See how that looks like. The icon is too big, so let's decrease the icon a little bit. Let's just see how that would look like. A little bit more. And I've noticed that we have padding on the left here, which now is offsetting the entire logo. So I'm going to go back to primary, and I'm going to click on this. Because we are not using an actual stroke anymore, I'm just going to change both the left and right and top and bottom to 0. See how that looks like. Okay, last but not least, I just want to decrease the actual color of it and fitness. I'm going to take this fitness and we're just going to change it to the primary color. See how that looks like. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. You know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to take this, take it a step further. I'm going to duplicate it, group that again, add auto layout, make sure vertical is bottom. And we're going to take this and we're going to say yoga studio. Beautiful. And I'm going to change this to 16, actually make it 14px. I'm going to change the bold to light. And we're going to go back to our frame here. We're going to right align it and we're going to get rid of this gap. We're going to see how that looks like. There we go. Light is a little bit too light. So let's change it to regular. Just going to add in the actual frame. I'm just going to add a bit of gap here. And with that all done, go back to the logo. We're going to increase the logo just a slight bit and see how that looks like. All right, that looks pretty good. I just want to see how it looks like if we take this text and we make it a line on the left side. There you go. That looks good. Spot on, spot on, spot on. So I'm going to take this whole thing that we just created, primary logo. We're going to say create component. Now that we've done that, we can hit save. And by the way, while we're here, I really like that color. I like that background color. So when we start playing around with variables and different font sizes and all that kind of good stuff here at the end, we're definitely going to accommodate that color. All right, so on the footer, first thing I'm going to do is we need to add our container as per usual. So obviously with the CTA, we used a container fluid, which of course is not going to work in this situation. So we're going to reuse the container coming from the team members, and we can take it here, we can copy it and go down to the footer, we can paste it in. Of course, as always, it's going to be on the left-hand side, which is fine. We've learned now that we always got to make sure that it is centered and make sure that it is in the center of the actual frame itself. Now, with that done, we just want to add our usual padding, top and bottom. And by the way, I'm going to use 48 this time and not 96. So the spacing number 5 of Bootstrap, I normally do that because footers just looks better if the spacing is not that big. And I'll show you why. We're going to create a different variation for sure. I'm going to click on the container, open up row, and we're going to get rid of the heading, and we're going to get rid of the paragraph copy. Going to go to assets, and we are going to look for the logo that we just created, which I don't see here, but I'm pretty sure if I search here at the top, I'm going to see it right there, which is perfect. So I'm going to drop that in, and we want to make sure to click on our actual frame because we want to preview that. So I'm going to use the right arrow till we get to that point. All right, that looks pretty good. Now what I want to do is go back to our main navigation. We're literally going to take this and we're going to reuse it. Saves us a lot of time if we don't need to redesign everything from scratch. So I'm going to take inner nav and we're going to say create component of it. We're going to go back, and if you use spacebar, hold in spacebar and you drag with your mouse, it's much easier than using the cursor or the mouse wheel for that matter. Mouse wheel sometimes takes a lot to get to the point, especially if your design starts getting big. All right, so with row selected, we're going to go to assets and we're going to search for nav. And right here, you can see is inner nav. So I'm going to take that, we're going to drop that in. And with that dragged in, we are going to go back to row. We're going to change our orientation to horizontal. I want to make this part auto. So it moves our logo to the left and our navigation to the right hand side. Now, because this is a footer, we're most likely not going to have this button, this call to action button, because if we have it, it's also going to show duplication, which can annoy certain people. So I'm just going to go ahead, not do that, not delete the whole thing. One thing we have to do here is we need to detach instance. And the reason for that is because we are modifying the actual inner contents. So I'm just going to delete that button. And we now have a basic looking footer. So when we look at the quick preview, when we look at that, that looks pretty good. So we're getting there. Next, I want to take the actual line tool and we're going to drag a line at the bottom or just drag it anywhere. And again, you're going to see it's going to put it exactly where you don't want it. That's pretty normal. We're going to take the container and we're going to duplicate it, go back to the footer, and we're going to change our orientation to vertical. And the line that we have, we're just going to rename that and call it separator. The second created container I have, I am going to delete everything that's within. And we are also going to change this auto and just make it 0. All right, now that we've done that, we can take the separator, we're going to drop it into that row. And now with that added, it looks like we are getting to a point where it's going to look like a separator. So let's finish the job. With the separator, I want to change the fixed width to full content, and we are going to select perhaps gray 300. That might be too light. Let's see. Yeah, that's too light. Let's select gray 400. Perfect. That looks good. Now I am going to go back to the footer and we're just going to add the gap. Let's make it 25. See how that looks like. Yeah, that looks pretty good. All right. Because this is a footer navigation, I don't want arrows. That's the other thing we got to get rid of. You don't normally have arrows in a footer navigation. So let's see how that looks like. Yeah, that looks good. I just want to increase the spacing, maybe 35. See how that looks like. Yeah, that looks good. All right, so we want to make sure this thing is centered. So I'm just going to click on the actual row. Yeah, we are centered, which is perfect. Okay, so now we've created our footer, a very basic footer. At the bottom here, we just want to add the usual, maybe social media icons on the right hand side and maybe copyright on the left hand side. So let's go ahead and we are going to take the container that we have. We're going to duplicate it and we're just going to clean out and get rid of the separator. We don't need that anymore. We're going to take a row. We're going to change that to auto. I'm going to take my text tool and drop it. And as always, it's not going to drop where you want it. That's fine. I'm going to say copyright and let's just, give it a date. 2023, 2024. Doesn't really matter. And with that, we're just going to say all rights reserved. It's normally a very standard thing that you add to a website. One thing I want to do is I want to make sure that we select base text. And I'm going to detach it because I don't want regular. Let's go for medium, see how medium looks like. And let's go for 800 year. And with that all done, I'm going to take this and drop it into the row. All right, so let's have a quick preview. Go back, let's add a few icons that's going to be on the right hand side. So I'm going to open up, I'm going to select the row before we open that up, but I'm going to select the row, open up Iconify. All right, so let's start with our infamous Facebook. I'm going to take that, drop it in. Let's go for, Twitter doesn't exist anymore. Let's see if they have X here. Oh, they do. Wow, that's awesome. All right, we're going to import, oh, it overrode it. No, it didn't. Okay, cool. The next one is Instagram. And of course, my favorite, YouTube. Definitely want YouTube. And now you can add TikTok if you want. I am not a fan of TikTok. I do not condole using TikTok or any of that, in my personal opinion. But I'm going to take all this, take all these frames, and we're just going to change it to groups. The good thing is that the actual size of these vectors are good enough. I mean, it's a good size, so we don't need to modify that. What we want to do is take all of these and we want to group it again, activate auto layout. We want to change auto. I'm going to give you a ridiculous number. That's fine. We're going to change that to 12. For some reason, Facebook over there, good old Facebook, is not doing what we are telling it to do. Okay, so this, another example of a little glitch of Figma. When you sometimes add a few items into a group and you add auto layout, you'll notice that some of them will change to position absolute. So when you see these little squares around the actual group, it means that position absolute on the right hand side has been activated. So we're just going to deactivate that. Once you do that, you're going to see all our icons are on the left hand side. One thing though is just I want to increase the actual spacing between them. Last but not least, I'm going to change the actual color, change that perhaps to primary, see how that looks like. That looks pretty good. So now we created a footer variation. One thing I want to do is take this home, the active, just change that to bold, see how that looks like. Awesome. We have a good looking footer. One thing I want to do is just fine tune it a little bit. So let's move this to here. Actually, I'm going to move it right to the end. Okay. We have a good looking footer and the footer is done. All right, so in the next part of the video, now that we have our footer done, we're going to put everything together. We're going to blend everything together. But before we do that, we're going to add a couple of variations for us. This is going to help you. We already created variations for our call to action, which is good. Now we're going to add a few variations here and there. We're going to add our font. We're going to put everything together and then we get to go.